If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
Okay, we'll open up the public hearing on House Bill 427 and hear from the prime sponsor, Representative Wallace. Good morning, Representative Wallace.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I am Representative Wallace, Rockingham County 33, which I represent the towns of Brentwood, Danville, and Fremont. I do have an amendment to the bill for a leadership request, but basically the purpose of the bill is to remove the prohibition on the hobby distillation of spirits. It's already lawful to make your own beer or wine, and the Hobby Distillation Association would like to be able to take it to the next level, and from that amount of wine and beer that you can already produce yourself for your own personal family consumption, this would remove the prohibition there too, but only from that already approved quantity of wine or beer that is permissible currently. Excuse me.
What did your amendment say?
Well, there was I received a call from leadership last evening, and that specifies the quantity that can be produced. The liquor can only be produced from the quantity of beer or wine that is already lawful to produce. So that would greatly reduce the quantity that would be produced.
So my understanding is that there's a federal law.
Correct.
That says you can't do this, period.
Currently, that is correct.
I mean, that's the ATF.
That is correct. That is correct.
Those guys, they burn buildings down. They're the ones that enforce it. So what would be the purpose of passing this if it's violation of federal law?
Well, there's currently 2 bills in front of U.S. Congress that would essentially do the same thing, that would remove the prohibition on the hobby distillation of spirits. And once that goes through, there's a chance that could happen this session. New Hampshire law would still not be consistent with the federal law. So this is one of the few times that we would like to be parallel with federal legislation.
Gotcha. That's all right. We do have questions. Representative Cummins, did you guys hear from them? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for presenting the bill to us. Distillation is probably the one area where you have to be concerned about producing methanol as part of the production process. And methanol, a relatively small amount of methanol can cause health problems, blindness, things like that. Wouldn't you be concerned about the idea that just anybody could start doing distillation and potentially, offer home-brewed liquor to friends and family that would then cause serious physical problems?
It's an excellent question, but this particular hobby is typically done by artisans that take great pride in their work, and they're very well educated in the subject matter. If you're familiar with the process, and it sounds like you are, I presume you're aware that those methanol products are in the very initial stages of the distillation process, and most hobby distillers discard 4 or 5 times the recommended amount of what is called the 4 shots of the process, in the interest of safety and getting to the really good parts, or the premium product in the center.
Further question, Mr. Clark?
But there's really no way to require this to only be done by hobbyists unless we had some sort of approval or test or license or something to be able to say, you know what you're doing when you do it.
That is correct, but I don't believe there's any reported incidences of that, and I assure you this is going on currently behind closed doors, and seeing that that's the case, I don't know that that's a valid objection, but I appreciate the point.
Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. We'll take that amendment. Yeah, pass it around. Okay, Representative Itza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Representative Dan Itza. I represent Rockingham County District 10, the town of Fremont. I do rise in support of the legislation and a co-sponsor. From my perspective, this is kind of a basic liberty issue. Making, distilling the alcohol that you are currently allowed to ferment into a beverage that you would prefer to consume. From a governmental point of view, it's us putting pressure on the federal government to do what we think is right. They're already considering it. The way to put pressure on them is to say, yes, we want this to happen. And the best way to do that is to say, you guys, to the federal government, if you approve it, then it's already law here in New Hampshire and we'll go forward. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you very much. Representative J.R. Hull, who's also a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Chairman Hunt. For the record, Representative Hull, representing the towns of Bow and Dunbarton, Merrimack 23. So again, we have potentially on our books bills that are unenforceable unless we start parading through people's homes. If someone were to set up and start distilling something because they wanted to make, I don't drink hard liquor, but maybe they wanted to drink sherry or something, right? Or pick some other liquor, wine, whatever, right? They could in fact do this at home out of compliance of the law, and unless someone put together all the paperwork necessary to get a search warrant, it's probably going undetected. So I like laws that are enforceable, ones that solve demonstrated problems. I don't know that we have a demonstrated problem. We have something on the books that really doesn't have a demonstrated problem that's probably difficult to enforce and potentially runs afoul of the Constitution in terms of some of our rights. So I would ask that you would support the bill. The amendment that Representative Wallace puts forward is completely in sync with the current statutory changes that were made in prior years regarding beer and wine. With that, I'll end my testimony.
Yeah, just so for the record.
Yes.
The identifiable reason why the federal government has insisted that distilling is illegal compared to beer and wine is that you can die.
As an
So
engineer,
there is identifiable problem.
right? As an engineer, you can die of lots of things, right? In terms of mixing all sorts of things and burning things. But I understand that, but we also, the person should be potentially somewhat knowledgeable about this before they start boiling off and condensing alcohol, as it is a fun subject.
I would venture to say that when someone gave me a beer making kit, I don't think they really knew what they were doing when I was making beer, but that was safe because theoretically I might get an upset stomach, but I can't kill myself.
Again, if we think about I don't know what I have to go back and look at the penalties currently in these sections of the statutes, what the penalty is. It may be overly harsh as well for violation of this. It's in Commerce. We're not in the Criminal Justice Committee, right? We're in Commerce. So the question is, does home distilling of a little bit of liquor actually affect the commerce laws of the state? And if it doesn't, I would find that the bill should be passed by the committee.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for your time. Chair will call on Representative Balacero, who's also a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's always an honor to come to your committee. For the record, Representative Al Baldwin, South Rockingham County District 5. Be short and sweet. Just to answer the, Mr. Chairman, when you asked that question about killing themselves, they said the same thing to the Italians when they were making wine. Okay, and that's still going on with other stuff that they made it with. So I heard that same thing many years ago. But anyways, this is a states' right issue. Okay, that's the reason why I'm involved in this here, because the federal government has overstepped their boundaries in many, many areas. And this is an opportunity for New Hampshire, to live free or die state, to stand up to the federal government, just like we do with medical marijuana, just like we force the VAs now in the ombudsman rule for them to turn their backs now, instead of knocking veterans out on the pain clinic, on the medical marijuana, just like anything else. It's a states' rights issue, and we have an opportunity to tell the federal government we're doing what New Hampshire wants to do. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you. What?
It's a states' rights issue until we pass the 18th Amendment. which
I'm sure you'll
created the
figure a way,
prohibition.
Mr. Chairman. how to
Which created the
pass
prohibition.
Uh-huh.
And the 21st Amendment, which just simply said we could back off from the prohibition, but that each individual states were allowed to make their own statutes, but the federal government still retained its right to implement anything it wanted when it comes to alcohol.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's a time that we finally stand up and take on the federal government.
Make America proud.
That's right, great again.
No, I'm working on the one for next year. No, for 4 years. He's already got the name, he's already got the new committee for 4 years. It's Keep America Great. Keep America Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, Ian Freeman from the New Hampshire Liberty Party is in support of the bill.
I'm Ian Freeman from Keene, one of the co-chairs of the New Hampshire Liberty Party. This seems like a sensible piece of legislation that expands the great freedoms that we already have here in New Hampshire. You did mention, Chairman Hunt, that the concern is this is dangerous. Well, I mean, that's an excuse the government uses in a lot of cases to regulate our freedoms away. On the other side of freedom is a lot of risk in a lot of cases, and there's things that we can do every single day with legal products and legal things that are incredibly risky. If I light a candle in my home and the dog comes around and knocks it over, then my house might burn down. But nobody's calling for the federal government to regulate the use of candles or license the users of candles. So, you know, risks are involved in this thing called life. And if we love freedom, then that's something that we should accept and embrace and educate people on what those risks are and how to be safe from them. The federal law might exist, but I do support what some of these folks are saying, that we need to challenge the federal government. That's part of what we've talked about with the marijuana legislation, and this is really no different from that. And further, anybody can distill today. I have a friend who, years ago, well, somehow they can buy these parts that they need to put these kits together or whatever. A friend of mine was in Keene probably about 5 years ago, and I forget what the reason why the police came to his house, but they came there, and it wasn't with a warrant or anything like that, but I guess they were at the door, somebody was talking to him at the door, and the cops peeked in and they saw the distillation kit out on the kitchen counter. They used that as their reason to then go in, confiscate the kit. Ultimately, they didn't charge him with anything, they just took the kit. So maybe one of the police officers decided they wanted to do some distillation and just sort of keep all that off the books. So thankfully he wasn't charged with anything over that, nor should he have been. I just thought I'd relay that one story of somebody that I know of that was just going ahead and doing this anyway. So might as well be legalized. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you. Chair will call on Jim Wilson, who is a liaison of the Liquor Commission.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
For the record, my name is Jim Wilson, James Wilson, and I represent the Liquor Commission. Not surprisingly, the Commission is opposed to this because of the federal prohibitions. I make myself available to answer any questions you have, but I think the majority of what I was going to talk about has already been covered. The fact that it is federally prohibited, that there are pretty stiff penalties for that behavior, and that there are obviously some serious public health concerns with the consumption of improperly distilled spirits. We have heard testimony that most of the people who would do this are artisans, and most of them would be very cautious, but what about that few that wouldn't? And what is the public health risk with that? I'm not aware of the federal legislation that has been mentioned that is pending. However, if that passes and we want to have that conversation in New Hampshire, the Commission would be happy to be part of that.
Yeah, I did a little Googling and research. The problem is we don't really know it's not good for you. We don't have a real test, like we don't do a methanol test to it. But the vast majority of people will just drink it first and then decide whether it's unhealthy. And unfortunately, that first hit could be the killer death. But I do have a couple questions for you. So the first question is, given that we don't have any allowance to distill in the New Hampshire statute, So if a law enforcement agent showed up at somebody's house and I assume they duly went back and got a search warrant because they saw a distillery, what state violation would they occur? Because the only ones I know is federal. So what state violation laws would we have to, because it's not listed in this bill to be permissible, what would your penalties be? What would be the penalty and this is obviously not a licensee, so you can't yank their license away. This would be a happy individual.
Right, it's an interesting one. We haven't run into a situation where we've charged anybody with this. If it is happening in New Hampshire, it's a very quiet thing that's going on. We have had instances where we've been alerted to operations that may be illegal distillation, and those have always turned into conversations with the individuals involved. There was a news story a few years ago of a moonshine still operation in the woods that was, I think, done by NHPR. But we haven't, to my knowledge, charged anybody with an illegal distillation. Under Title 13, violations of Title 13, as you probably are aware, are misdemeanors if you're a natural person or felonies if you're not, right, if you're an entity. Since we haven't had to deal with that, we have really no history of it. That particular statute is, sets out the permissible acts, and I would think that we would have a conversation with the attorney or the AG's office on are we charging here as an act not permitted, as a misdemeanor level offense.
Right. So it's a class A misdemeanor, right?
Right.
It doesn't say one of them.
Right. If it's not specifically
Class A
enumerated.
misdemeanor. And then obviously if somebody dies from it, then you move it over to the attorney for
Right.
whether it was a manslaughter.
A negligent or right.
Manslaughter. And I do have one more question, but okay. So my last question is, this is where we all know too much. How about rectifying? If I were to take a bottle of alcohol, a vodka, and get some really good stuff, maybe I start with 151, party 151, and start mixing things in it. Do we have any statutes regulating rectifying?
No, and people make limoncello all the time, and that is the act of rectification.
Right.
But you are starting with a finished spirit that has come from a bonded distillery, so there are no concerns about the ethanol piece of that, poisoning piece.
Perfect. Okay, Representative.
Thank you. Could an individual in New Hampshire wanting to do this apply for a distiller's license?
You could apply for a bonded, to become what they would call a bonded distillery, which is the federal level permittation for that. The federal government will not issue a bonded distillery permit. It's my understanding they want to issue a bonded distillery permit to a residential property. So even though you may qualify if you have a business or you want to do it as a sole proprietor, you couldn't do it at a residential property.
I see.
So that was the problem over in Winchester? He had it in his garage or something?
Well, that was a beer issue, but that was.
He's got a distillery now. There's a whiskey distillery in Winchester on the corner.
I'm thinking of the one that had the garage, the brewery.
That other one, yeah, that guy in Greenfield. No, I'm
Right.
thinking the one, okay. So, all right.
Just a quick follow-up. So the process is a federal license is required before the state will issue a license?
Yes, for manufacturing, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, in any license you have to first get your federal. We won't even talk to you until you have your federal. So how much is that federal license, you know?
For a
Distillery.
$1,692.
Steep. That's
No, that's the state.
That's our state is
Right.
1,600. You get your federal.
Right.
Who knows it all right? Any other questions for Mr. Wilson? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Chair has one more card left. George Roberts from Anheuser-Busch, who is in opposition to the bill.
It's,
Oh, you did a different bill? Okay, sorry. It's fine. Sorry, George. Okay. Yes, do you want to wrap it up?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yep, certainly, we're going to have to grab the blue sheet anyway, so go ahead.
two points. Just for clarification, from my understanding of the RSA's, there is no prohibition for possession of a still as it can be used for many purposes, not just, you can distill, a lot of people have them in their homes for distillation of water. A lot of dentists, a lot of surgeons, they have a water distillation setup that's electric in their homes for their professions. And it's exactly the same type of equipment. And just for clarification, this is from the hobby distillers. They want to make sure that there's no, they're not associated or advocating for moonshining in any way, manner, or form. This is clearly an artisan activity. The big reason is the cost to do this is quite steep, $1,600 at the state level. The paperwork at the federal level is staggering, as you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Thank you.
If the ATF is involved, I'm sure it's staggering. Okay, let's see, Daryl Perry already spoke. Dick Hinch, House Majority Office is in opposition. Bill Anderson, Hubbard is in support. Alan spoke. Representative Stephen Rand is in support. And David Juris is also in support. And with that, I will close the public hearing and let's go to the liquor subcommittee.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.